These are your notes. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Catherine Bush, and you are joining us either live in the Great Hall or online at Calvary Episcopal Church for our adult formation conversation this morning with our very own Gabbie Munn. Gabbie has been our youth minister here at Calvary Church for about 4 years, and I came late to the party. And I'm glad that we overlapped for a minute, and I'm sorry that it was just for the short window that it was. But I'm very grateful for the conversation today because I'm going to get to hear some of the backstory of how her journey brought her, first of all the way to Calvary, and the exciting chapter that is in front of her, which is that she is heading off to Seminary of the Southwest this summer and embarking on her journey to seminary and ultimately to ordination in the Episcopal Church. So she has a beautiful story to tell you that is hers, and I'm not going to take any more time away from that. So please welcome Gabbie Munn.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Gabbie. I'm happy to be here. When Catherine asked me to share a little bit of wisdom this morning, I thought that was a lot of pressure, especially for all the great people we have here at Calvary. But I have about 20 days left here. And I think when you near the end of any sort of chapter in your life, you do a lot of reflection. And in the past 2 years, I've been in discernment, and so that reflection has been mandatory. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about how in the world I got from South Mississippi to a research lab, and then ultimately to youth ministry in Memphis, Tennessee. And it definitely didn't happen on accident, and nothing happens in a vacuum. I didn't wake up one day and cold call Calvary for a job, and I did not wake up one day thinking that I wanted to be a youth director. It was a series of people and places that ministered to me, were intentional, and truly set my life on a course to say yes to opportunities and to be given opportunities to be a leader and to fail at those things in safe spaces. And so today we're going to talk about a little bit of the people and places that have formed me and think about those moments. So first of all, who am I? I'm Gabbie Munn. I live in Midtown, and I love it there. I have a cat named Nora, and I cannot believe that she did not make the picture on the slide. That's my bad, everybody. I will say that this presentation is picture heavy, and I would like to do a shout out to my mom's Facebook for those pictures where they were all there. So I love to be outside, and I love to fly fish. And I mostly love to do things that I'm not very good at yet, which means that I spend a lot of time piddling on the guitar and throwing things into a water and hope that they catch something. And I definitely consider Memphis my home now. I've been here about 4 years, and when people ask me where I'm from, I definitely say I'm a Memphian, which is bittersweet to be counting down the days. But really, I'm from South Mississippi, and there's a picture for proof of me with the fish, so definitely a Mississippi girl. I grew up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and I attended the University of Southern Mississippi, and I earned a degree in polymer science and chemistry, which meant that if I wasn't studying chemical mechanisms, I was in the lab weighing out polymers and titrating and messing up lab experiments for my postdoc that I worked under, who was very patient. And my big plan was medical school. It's what I've always dreamed of doing. I had the little medical bag as a kid. It was the whole plan. Had all the books. It was a very detailed itinerary. There were Google Docs. There were Excel sheets. That's what I was doing. Which is interesting now that I am a youth director, right? How does one go from spending every single day in a research lab and taking the MCAT and making this application for higher education in that way to being a youth director? And that's what I do now. So I've been here about 4 years. This is actually my 5th year, though, as a full-time youth director. And if you had told me at graduation that I would be doing this, I would call you crazy, definitely. I tell people all the time that I have the most fun job in the world, and it's true. If you've ever spent any time in the 3rd floor or gone on a trip with us or spent any time with the youth here at Calvary, I definitely have the most fun job in the entire world. I work with the 6th through 12th graders here. We do confirmation, we do youth group events, we do happenings, which is where this picture is from, and sometimes we put turkeys on our head and recreate statues at Calvary together. When I got here, there was no thought in my mind that I would be here for 4 years. I had no idea what was ahead of me, and truly I am here because there were people along the way who pushed and pulled me into spaces that allowed me to see the gifts and talents I had and the spaces in which those could grow. So, I'm a lifelong Episcopalian, except for my couple middle school rebellious years where I went to a Methodist church. I have grown up in Episcopal churches across Mississippi, and I have pictures to prove it, right? So the first one, Episcopal Church of the Creator in Clinton, I don't remember much, but I couldn't resist not putting my bonnet in there. I should have brought it as a little prop. And then I spent a lot of time at St. Andrew's Cathedral in Jackson, and I think that was the first place where I felt like the church was truly my home. I have siblings that are 10 years older than me, and if you are a younger sibling, you know that if your older sibling is doing something, you just have to go along and be there. And so because they were acolytes at the cathedral that had 4 services a day, I got there early, and I stayed to the very end so they could acolyte at every service. But I was only required to go to 1, which meant that during the other services, I roamed the hallways, hung out with Edgar in the fellowship hall, took a nap in the associate's office. I was all over the place. I think we probably know a couple like young people at Calvary who are like that, and that is excellent. I love that. But in my the happiest little angel in the world, right behind me is Reverend Yemili Baschot, and she is the first prominent female clergy person in my life. She was very charismatic and energetic. I remember once her alb caught on fire from the incense, and she looked down and just kept going, right? She was like, it'll figure itself out. But I remember very vividly once being about 7 or 8 and wandering into her office and looking up on the wall and seeing all of these pictures of female icons in the church. There was a Jesus depicted as a woman. There was the Mother God. And as a 7-year-old, that was very confusing to me, right? That was not what we got in Catechesis of the Good Shepherd or in, the stained glass windows in the church. And I asked her, I was like, I hate to tell you this, Yemili, but I think that you might be off on something here, like what is this? And so she introduced me to the idea and the concept of a Mother God and was very patient and understanding and explaining to me that there are answers to questions out there that I had no idea even existed. And I'm so grateful for it, right? Because it got me thinking that maybe there is first a curiosity in myself about what is going on in this place, but for somebody to take time out of being an associate at a cathedral to talk to a 7-year-old about the big ideas of God meant something, and 20 years later, I'm still thinking about it and writing it down in my seminary application. I felt very home in this church. And then we moved down to Hattiesburg, and we attended Trinity Episcopal Church. They forgave me for my rebellious Methodist years. And in my senior year of college, still attending Southern Miss, they invited me to come give the sermon at church, which was interesting to me because I don't think they had seen me there in a couple of years while I was in college. But I was grateful they did. I became very close with the campus chaplain my senior year and kind of got back into the Episcopal Church. And it was a moment where I was a little embarrassed to come back because I had taken these 3 years and kind of shied away, RSVP'd no to all of these collegiate events. And when I finally got back involved my senior year, it truly was like I'd never left, and I felt a little bit less embarrassed, right? They invited me to come give this sermon my senior year. I will say, I'm glad that there was no live stream in this moment in our time, and I hope that's the worst sermon I ever give. But they were uplifting and they were affirming, and I remember getting to church and wearing one of my best dresses, assuming that I would just get up into the pulpit in what I was wearing. And they were like, oh, well, obviously you're going to vest. And I don't know why that moment was so surprising to me. because I was like, are you sure? Because I'm not a real preacher, right? I'm just giving the sermon. And they were like, no, we've trusted you to put your thoughts about this gospel onto paper and share it. We're doing the whole thing. And it was small, right? It was a small moment, but I remember it being very affirming and kind of got me curious about what this all meant. So I'm a lifelong Episcopalian from Mississippi, which also means I have grown up at Camp Bratton Green. If you look in the middle of the, let's see, right here, I'm about 6 months old at Camp Bratton Green. And so when I say, like, I grew up in this place, my baby pictures are in this place. Because when your older siblings go somewhere, you follow right along with them. And so this is me and my sibling Cecily at the craft shack. And then the third picture is my last day as a permanent staff member with my first camper ever. And I'm thankful it's a little pixelated because I have very teary eyes in the last one. But it definitely is a place that grew up. I grew up there. It formed me. It was a place where I first learned about respecting the dignity of every human being, where inclusivity and respect was not an option. It was the absolute bottom line for how we treat human beings. And I am thankful for, one, the people who gave me an example, and for older persons in my life who, when I stumbled in that goal and mission, very gracefully corrected me, right? No better way to learn than to fail and be corrected by somebody you love and trust. And I loved it because it did give me opportunities to be a leader and to explore the church. I never thought it was an odd thing that some of my best friends were priests, right, growing up, and that's not necessarily something that every 20-year-old looks up and has. And there was once where I was a junior in college, and I was being a counselor for our winter camp, winter solstice, and Reverend Jennifer Southall had asked me to give a talk on love, which in the church is kind of a layup, right? Love is probably the easiest, talk about that all day. And I gave a sermon to a group of 9th through 12th graders. I gave a talk, right? 5 minutes, talk to them about love. Hope they get something out of it. I know they're all thinking about canteen. We'll be really quick. And so I gave this talk and I walked out, and Jennifer pulled me aside, and I was like, what did I say wrong? What did I say in this talk that was not theologically bound? Did I go off script for something? I don't know. She pulled me aside and she was like, I don't know if you know this, but you just gave a sermon and you should consider ordained ministry. And I was like, Jennifer, that's crazy. People become priests, but not me, right? But thank you so much. And she was like, I'm serious, I'm not kidding. That was a sermon and you should just consider it. Just think about it. So I've been thinking about it ever since, right? And another person I met at Camp Bratton Green was a woman named Whitney Robinson, and she is now the missioner for children and youth in the Diocese of Mississippi. And this is kind of where it all comes together a little bit. It was my senior year of college, and for the first time in my life, I was feeling a little iffy about my very detailed track for medical school. I was feeling a little burnt out in the research lab, and something in me said that this was maybe an opportunity to take a step back and miss science. I didn't love it in the way that I used to, and so I had decided, if something comes along, maybe I won't hit submit on this application, kind of just hoping that something would happen. So I get a Facebook notification from Whitney Robinson, somebody I met when I was much, much younger and hadn't talked to in years. And she was like, what are your plans for after graduation? And I was like, well, as of yesterday, I don't quite know. And she said that there is an opening at the Chapel of the Cross in Madison, Mississippi, and that I should just consider applying. And I was like, well, that's great, but it could only be for a year since I'm going to medical school, So I called Reverend Ben Robertson, which some of you may know, and I said, listen, I'm interested, but let me be so clear. Only a year, because I have a plan. And so I interviewed with him a couple times, and got the job at Chapel of the Cross in Madison. that I was at for a year, right? I kind of went into the job thinking that they had grossly mishired and that something terrible was going to happen because I had just spent 4 years putting polymers into pipettes, right? Not leading a youth group or coordinating service trips. But they were very affirming, and I had realized that all of my time being with people in the Episcopal churches in which I grew up and being with people at Camp Bratton Green had modeled for me what it looks like to be a successful youth director. Yes, I sent out emails late. I'm better about it now. And I did all the things that you do learning as a 22-year-old in a job that you never thought you had. But it stretched me in ways that I did not expect. And I found that I didn't miss science as much as I thought I would, unfortunately. And I loved the relational aspect of the job. I loved that I got to get up at 6 a.m. and go meet a kid for coffee before school, or go to schools for lunch, or call parents when you hear something's going on. To be in relation with people every day was a huge change from spending 6 hours with an analytical machine, hoping that what I did 12 hours ago in the research lab worked. It usually didn't. But it was such a change and I loved it. And I kind of thought to myself, I'm not sure I ever really want to go back to work that is not rooted in people. And so in about April, I went on to the Episcopal Job Search Network, and I found that Calvary Episcopal Church was hiring. In Memphis, I had spent a summer here in college as an intern at St. Jude. I loved it, and I emailed Amber Carswell, and she said, you know what, we're in the middle of Lent, so it's a little busy. And I was like, okay, well, I'm doing Lent. It's not that busy for me. But I found out that I was very wrong. She was very busy. And she was like, once Lent's over and Holy Week's over, I'll give you a call. And so I traveled up, interviewed with Amber and Scott, and truly the rest you've all been a part of. So I have been here at Calvary for about 4 years with about 20 days left, which is something I realized yesterday, and I had a little moment, right? But I have gotten to learn so much about myself in this space and learn this space. I spent my first week at Calvary doing a daily walk through the building and hoping I didn't get too lost to not make it back to my car. But it really helped me understand the space a little bit better. It definitely stretched me in ways I didn't anticipate. I, as you have seen, grew up in Mississippi, went to school there, and this is my first time living outside of the state of Mississippi. Although, we're very close. I will give you that. I could be there in a couple minutes. But it's the first time I had ever been outside the state, and the first time I was ever in a diocese where I couldn't throw a rock and hit somebody I knew since I was 7, which I think I kind of craved and loved. I love the Episcopal Church, but to be in it in a new context was a hope that it would be the same church I loved. You know, I wanted to make sure that I did not have these rose-colored glasses from all my years at summer camp, that the Episcopal Church and its values truly was the place that I knew and loved in a space that I wasn't familiar with. And it's been excellent so far, right? I've gotten to see the ordination of Bishop Phoebe, which was incredible. I've gotten to meet all of you and have new colleagues and be in a new space and learn how to be a youth director for a new group of kids who keep graduating, which is crazy. And about a couple years into my time here at Calvary, I thought to myself, okay, well, I need to sell all those MCAT books for real this time, and I need to figure out how I can be a part of this forever. And I was pretty set that I would be a lay minister for the rest of my life. I didn't really know what that looked like, but I had seen people convince bishops to hire them before, and I was like, well, after this, maybe I can convince a bishop to hire me or somebody else, because I have to stay doing this work. I love it so much. And I heard about a discernment program that is centered towards young adults that is for vocation. They pitched it, they said, listen, is this not seminary, yes or no? And I was like, great, because the answer is no. So let's talk about vocation. What do I want to be doing with my gifts and talents? How do I impact the greatest number of people with the talents that I have been given by God? And I want to do it in community. And I think I always love making decisions and finding that in community, because it's when I say something out loud to somebody else, it becomes very clear when that's not quite what I wanted to say. And to get that feedback, and feedback from people that I knew and trusted, meant a lot to me. So in January of 2020, our favorite year in the whole world, I started discernment with young adults in the Diocese of Mississippi, which obviously quickly went virtual. And I had a lot of time to reflect on all of these things. All of these things that I mentioned today were the things that I wrote in papers for discernment when they said, who are the people that showed the love of God for you? Yamili, Jennifer Southall, Whitney Robinson. Where are the places that you have felt God the most? In the fellowship hall at St. Andrew's Cathedral, Camp Bratton Green, Craft Shack. These are the places in which it feels like God is so clear in my life, and truly nothing happens in a vacuum, and nothing happens by itself. And so last year, in February, I was granted postulancy, and it took me a long time for me to gain confidence that I was using that word correctly. There's a lot of jargon in the Episcopal Church, but basically it means that I'm going to seminary and have been given permission by a bishop to do so. And I went to the bishop and I said, I know this sounds crazy and I do want to go, but I need one more year at Calvary. It did not feel in the moment like this was the time to wrap things up. We were kind of coming out of the pandemic a little bit, being in person a little bit more, and when I say it just felt right, it really truly did, to be in this space one more year and to prepare myself for that. And so I'll be attending the Seminary of the Southwest in the fall, and on track for a hopeful ordination in the Episcopal Church, which is, of all the things that I have mentioned today, the craziest notion to me. Because when I went into discernment, I told them, I was like, listen, you can't convince me, it's gonna be a no. And I'm pretty sure about that. But as we see that all my best laid plans are absolutely nothing compared to what the Holy Spirit puts in me. I always say that the Holy Spirit lives in my stomach, and towards the end of the discernment process, meeting with the bishop, my stomach kind of hurt, and I thought like, oh, I am really scared he's gonna tell me that he wants me to go to seminary, because now I think I kind of do. And the rest is history. So that's my Reader's Digest version of how I got from a random research lab in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, up to Calvary in Memphis, Tennessee. And I don't think it's all coincidence, right? I don't think the Facebook message was a coincidence. I don't have faith in God, or faith that I am doing these things because of a series of really cool coincidences in my life. I believe that people were acting on faith and acting with the Spirit when they reached out to me or poured into me as a third grader at camp, or as a 7-year-old in the associate rector's office who answered all my questions. These are not random acts, but they all did lead me here. And I think choosing a vocation is a little bit harder than just picking something off the list that your high school teacher hands you in English class when you take a personality test. Which growing up, I kind of thought I had like 8 options, right? There are the things on the piece of paper that I was told, like, here are the jobs to have. But finding a vocation, and as I talk to other young adults in my life, we all struggle with this. I want to have a job, right? But I also want that job to be my vocation. And if it's not, I want my vocation elsewhere, to find a place that you can impact people. And I dare say that everyone in this room at Calvary may find that here. And some people, I'm sure, just stumble in curious about some red doors and great music to Calvary, but I think a lot of us pull people in and have been pulled in by people. And so my question for us all today is who are the people and places that form us as Calvary, as individuals, as people who look for vocation in their own lives? Who affirmed you over a cup of coffee in the Great Hall, or invited you in on a Sunday afternoon, or even to the Episcopal Church in general? Or if you feel, who brought you into the job you do now, right? Who gave you that drive and that umption to say, I know you may not think you'd be good at this, but have you considered? I think it's worth remembering, because these are the people that when we look back and reflect on our lives have done this for us. And truly, when I have a moment where I think, maybe I'm not doing a good job in my own youth ministry position, or maybe I'm having a bad week, it is helpful for me to be reminded that if I just do what others have done for me, then I'm doing an okay job. So I'm a youth director, so we're all going to have some little small group time. Everyone, turn to the person beside you, or find 3 or 4 people and tell them who you are, give them one new fun fact, and share with them about a person or a place that you feel has formed you, a place where you've seen God in somebody, someone affirmed God in you, or you feel you have felt close. All right, thanks y'all for indulging me for a moment. Does anybody here have something that they heard that they would like to share? A person or a place or a moment in their lives?
The person John named was his mother.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day.
Well done. Well done.
If we were upstairs on the third floor, I would call on somebody, but I would love that.
So one of the ministries that I got involved with at Calvary, first was the choir, but the second one was Soup Sunday. And I'm not sure how exactly I got involved in it from the very beginning, but I became the leader of it when Peggy Rowe, who was the leader, was at home with hospice in a bed, about to die, and she called me and said, "Would you come see me?" And I went, and while she was laying there in the bed, she asked me if I would please take over Soup Sunday. So that was a hard one to say no to. And so that's how I got to be leading that ministry.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else have something from themselves they would like to share?
I'm long-winded, so I'm not going to go into any more than 15 seconds of this. God woke me up about a year ago, and he says, I want you to do something for me. I said, sure, anything. I want you to write your life in times. I went, what? I want you to put down how many times you've almost died. I did it once, and then he said, you're not right. Get it right. It's 19. Now you go, why would I share that? Well, it's kind of interesting because of this. How much do we really believe that God is God? Well, I believe a lot because I was circled by 3 sharks when I was 13. And I spent a year in prison in Japan. That's just twice. And I was in 2 fires, so that's 4 times. And 2 broken backs, but, you know, that's longer than 20 seconds.
Thank you for sharing. Any other takers?
Well, John and I talked a little bit about summer camp as well, and it's interesting that it came up in your story so vividly, and I didn't mention this to him, but he's drawn toward ministering at summer camp maybe this summer and further on, and that was a part of mine, and I hadn't named that being drawn into specifically religious context of ministry happened in that kind of community in a really powerful way. And several people at the camp I grew up in were important, but it makes me think about going forward, how do we continue to create these spaces where maybe young people in particular are named as ministers and as gifted people and that have something to offer to the world. And camps seem to do some really unique work around that. So, yay camps.
Absolutely. I think camps give you a unique opportunity to put your walls down and become very much yourself, because it is very encouraged to camp to be silly and your own person. And so if you can't be that at school or you can't be that in your household, you could definitely be that at the craft shack or the lake at any summer camp you go to. And to have leaders that affirm those personalities, I think is very powerful. All right, well, thanks everybody. I was admittedly very nervous to get up here and share my story just because we just have really excellent people who share here at Calvary, but I have been very grateful to be here for so long, and we'll absolutely be making flights back here to Memphis to worship and be with y'all. I'm sure there are many more tears to come, and I will say goodbye before I start doing that. But thank you all, and I'm going to miss y'all.